Hey, I'm Roberto. I'm with Exponential-e, and I want to bring to you some stories and some insights around what we got up to at Retail Hive, together with my colleague Dave. So what Dave and I want to bring to you is some of the real highlights, some of the interesting talking points, some of the insights that we got to share under Chatham House rule. So obviously we're not going to talk too much about names and stuff, but I think there's some things that were really interesting that we heard that we really want to share with you. And really the bottom line was no network, no trade. So Dave, look, just give us a little intro about who you are, what you're doing. We've obviously worked together a long time. Over to you.
Sure, thanks Roberto. So yeah, Dave Watson, I've been at Exponential-e for 15 years now, so feel part of the furniture now. I've worked in a few different industries at the company so far, but my last several years has been focused on the retail, leisure and hospitality sector, and trying to help technology leaders advance technology investment within their organisations to get better outcomes. And I think we're seeing, as we see from the Retail Hive now, there's a lot more interesting topics rather than your typical infrastructure conversations we've been used to having. We're talking more about customer loyalty, experiential environments, and just the next era of technology investment that are happening. And AI is obviously a big part of that as well. So some really interesting conversations that we had at the event last week.
Yeah, cheers for that. So we covered a bunch of different topics there. We actually had the opportunity to run some roundtables as well and share some insights with tech leaders and really have interesting conversations around the things that they're up to.
Yeah.
But what attracted you to Retail Hive, and why did you think Retail Hive was a good shout for you turning up?
I think we had a good mix of target audience. So ideal customer profile for Exponential in terms of the type of clients that were going there, sorts of organisations we're working with, similar size, and then the list of representatives from those organisations. That IT leadership personas there, which is the type of people we often talk to. But it was interesting though, because you didn't just have technology leaders; it was people that are responsible for customer loyalty programs and the DevOps and things. So you end up having more interesting conversations. So it's a bit more insightful from that respect. I found it.
Yeah, sounds good. And we had we had a few different topics that we brought to the table. We wanted to share some insights with people, but we also wanted to validate the things that we've been talking about and the things that we've learned from our customer base. What do you think was the single biggest item on everyone's agenda?
I would say probably the biggest thing was the experiential advancement and progress, and people are really thinking now about how do they make a customer's journey great online, right the through way to the store, the whole journey, even into the fitting room experience. I was speaking to one of the apparel retail organisations we would have all shopped in at some point. I'm sure I'm a regular shopper myself, and what they're doing around creating more sort of immersive experiences within fitting rooms to make your journey easier. So if, for example, you try a garment on and it doesn't fit, you can literally click a button, it alerts somebody on the shop floor and they'll bring that item for you without you having to kind of call out a shop assistant or go and find that garment yourself. Actually physically have to leave the changing room and then come back again. And as a consumer, and I told the technology leader about this, I said, me as a consumer, I'd find that a really useful feature to have. What they're also talking about as a next iteration is to be able to pay whilst you're within the fitting room. So you can literally bring all the garments in, try everything on, press a button to get somebody to bring out an alternative size if what you've taken doesn't fit you, and then right through to be able to purchase that in the fitting room and even de-tag it. And there's some clever stuff they'll do. I questioned around the security and like loss prevention and things like that and theft. And they would do things where it would inactivate the tags once they've been purchased. So it's really interesting what's happening now. And I think where we talk about some of the areas that some of the expertise and services that we provide, one thing that came back from that was around not neglecting the basics of infrastructure that happens within a store. Because I asked a very crude question. I said, if your network infrastructure in the store was to have a failure in that moment in the fitting room, what would happen? And the lady said it would stop working. So I do think it's not neglecting basics as well. We're always looking at these advanced technologies and what the consumer experience is like. You can't neglect the things that makes all those things operate and run in the first place.
Yeah, it's a really interesting one. And there was a guy from a department store, and they accepted that they couldn't really compete in certain areas compared to lots of other companies and lots of other retail outfits and operations in the area. So how do they compete? And you made a really good point about creating an experience and opening up a bar and a cafe and having cheese tasting and doing all these other things that we're going to create dwell time, ultimately keep the customer engaged and give them a shopping experience. And through that, create memorable moments that mean that people keep coming back and they keep coming back to that particular store as opposed to others. So I think that idea about experiential experiences really is one that we heard lots of people doing things towards that.
Yeah.
What about personalisation? Because, for a long time, people have been talking about loyalty schemes and other ideas around that kind of vein. So what kind of ideas were people talking around in that space?
Well, there was a really interesting guy there, and he'd previously worked at a luxury brand, and he was talking about having almost like sentiment analysis of when consumers enter the store to know what they're feeling. Because I don't know about you, I can sometimes I'm more approachable. It depends on what day of the week it is, but I can walk into a store and I'm happy to be approached and asked if I need any help, do I need new sizes. Sometimes I do want to be left alone. I want to walk around the store at my own peril and just browse and pick things up at my own time. And I can be a bit resistant, and I've been walked out of a store before because I've been asked several times the same question. I get a bit irate and I walk out. So he was talking about having some kind of button that you press. So you enter a store and it almost identifies, yes, I'm approachable today, or no, I'm not. And I just thought it was a really interesting concept, because there's definitely days where I probably would appreciate having a button to press to say, leave me alone today. I just want to look around your store. I might buy something. I don't need anyone to kind of harass me throughout my journey in your store. So that's quite an interesting one. In practice, I don't know how that would work. Obviously, there's a lot of technology you would need to make that happen. But we didn't get into the weeds of how it would work, but it was certainly something that was brought up, and a lot of people around the table shared the same view that would be quite a useful thing to have for those days where we don't want to be approached.
When they say, I feel like talking today, come help me, I need service.
Yeah, because I think we're talking about experience, right? And ultimately, if you can choose, you're almost choosing your experience when you're into the store, aren't you? I want to be kind of wine dine today, or I don't, leave me alone. And in either scenario, if you was to click a button and you got your desired outcome, you should leave the store in a happy state.
Yeah.
So...
And I guess linked to that, I think people started talking around the themes of frictionless shopping and frictionless experiences. And, through that, there was one particular retailer who was talking about how their app actually now offers wayfinding and helps you navigate these big warehouses. They run big warehouses around the place. And I think when you were trying to find a small item on those big shelves, that can be quite complicated, quite difficult.
Yeah, I guess like a B&Q or something like that. Sometimes it can be a really tiny item.
Yeah.
And it can be challenging to find that at times,
yeah.
Especially when you want to get in and out because you're doing a DIY project over a weekend or something. So
yeah, I had an interesting conversation with one guy who runs a sort of mid-market, mid to luxury tier clothing brand, and he was nervous about the cashless idea. And obviously, some retailers have taken the dive, gone 100% into that idea that we're going to run cashless. And this company hasn't done that yet. And I think their average basket was around about £200. So, people are spending decent money, but they still felt the compelled to take cash payments in fear that some people would turn up with cash and they wouldn't accept them, and what would happen as a result.
Yeah.
What do you say to those organisations that are still running that way?
I mean, I'm very rarely, personally, I very rarely walk around with cash now, so I can see why there's been a big adoption of cashless. But I can also see why people want to operate both payment facilities, because like you say, my brother as an example, I know he likes having cash in his wallet, so he uses cash a lot for payments. So there's going to be a mixture of people in different methods, aren't there? So I don't think there's a right or wrong way. I don't think you should necessarily go cashless. More environmentally friendly, sustainability metrics, it might help towards those sorts of goals. I think where it can be advantageous to go cashless is when you have digital receipts sent to you, because ultimately you're holding really useful information on the customer at that point, what they've purchased, what they've spent. And I wonder if that's the sort of material that could be produced in marketing, or personalisation. If you know that somebody's the last time they come into a store and they purchased a pair of jeans, have you often seen from other customers when they bought them jeans, they bought matching pair of trainers or a t-shirt or a jumper or whatever it might be. So it allows you to potentially advertise more personalised content to those people because of the digital payment you took. Obviously, you don't get that if you're making cash transactions.
Yeah. And I guess linked to that, that's where people start talking about digital signage and other, sort of rich media experiences and offerings that people are actually starting to adopt these days, including retail media networks. What were you talking to people around that?
Well, I gave a really good an example of an organisation that I feel was doing it really well, which is WH Smith. And the reason I say they're doing well is because it lured me in. Last year, when I went to Morocco, I literally saw the adverts about both speaker and like the savings they had on it on that particular moment, and it made me go in there and I purchased it. I didn't actually plan to go and buy a portable speaker for that holiday, but I saw the advertisement and I did, and I think that's a really good use case and it's compelling and it works. I'm evident of that, and I've had other people tell me about it, and obviously just being able to use the bricks and mortar space that you're already operating in to then use it as an advertising space as well for monetizing that data and creating an additional revenue stream. I think it's a bit of a no-brainer for obviously the brands where they've got multiple branded products in their scenarios. Obviously you couldn't go into a Marks and Spencer or a Hugo Boss and do that because obviously you're only selling your own brands in there, but certainly department stores and multi-brand operators should certainly be at least thinking about the retail media concept now.
Yes.
It's definitely certainly an additional revenue stream to monetize on, and the investment is in some technology. Sometimes people have already got screens there, so it's just about the content management side of things. So
there was a guy that made an interesting point about the clientele and sharing clientele, not necessarily competing on the product, but just competing for their time, because the typical client for a high-end department store is probably the typical client for this high-end luxury brand who sells trench coats. And so he was talking about interesting collaborations and the opportunity for collaboration and how they would make that work from a technology standpoint, because they're after the same client. They want the same client to sell them different things. Yeah. So it was an interesting idea there. And I guess that ties into logistics, and obviously concessions seems to be more of a prevalent topic. It was one that a lot of people around the tables were talking about, the idea of concessions. People are also talking about the idea that fulfillment is now taking place from the store, and they can do lots more as a result. What did you hear?
Yeah, I heard a lot about that. One company in particular, I mentioned them earlier, B&Q, have been doing that for a few years now. So you've got all these huge warehouse stores as it is. Why have real estate costs for fulfillment centres in addition to your stores when there's a big warehouse at the back end anyway holding stock for a store? So it's almost like the last mile is quicker to the customer in that respect. A bit like Screwfix, where they're around loads of locations, and it is ultimately a big customer facing warehouse. You order, go and collect, and off you go. So yeah, we're hearing a lot of people talking about, it's almost like they're saying bringing the last mile of where the stock is located and held to the customer for speed of delivery, speed of collection. So a lot of that seems to be happening now, and a lot of more thought is happening around other retailers doing that.
Yeah. Some of them were talking about the problems with returns and the complexity around that, and how they actually get it back from the chain involved. Well,
yeah, because you've got I was speaking to a lady, and I guess as a consumer, I didn't really appreciate the effort and the cost and time that goes into returns. It's not you're thinking about DPD or whichever delivery drivers come and delivered your item, and then you having to go back to either get a collection from home or go into a post office and send it off. And often you're doing that at no cost to you as the consumer. And on the retailer side, it's the cost of delivery to you, the cost of delivery back, the cost of unpacking items, scanning things, putting them back in. And in many occasions, many scenarios, sometimes those items are damaged as well, and they can't necessarily evidence that the consumer did that damage. So there is actually a lot of cost and waste in returns, and it is hitting the bottom line of a retailer, unfortunately.
That's why a lot of them are tightening up on returns now.
Yeah, I mean, you're seeing some now, aren't you, saying that it's going to cost you to return. And again, on the consumer side, it's a bit like, oh, I didn't used to have to pay for that now. And it's a bit, oh, I have to pay for that now. But my business head says, I completely understand why they're doing it. So why should they have to foot the bill for every return? Because again, it's, if you look at all of the increased costs they've incurred over the last year or so with NI contribution rises, the national wage increase and things like that, they've taken a hell of a hit already, probably quite tight margins already. So I just think I can see why they're adjusting that returns model now.
Yeah, and we also spoke to a lady from a food delivery box manufacturer, provider. Groceries. And, they don't share the same challenges as a lot of bricks and mortar retail operators, but they definitely felt the pain around national living wage increases to the minimums there, increases to national insurance, and their workforce. Obviously, a lot of it is that audience. But then we started getting into some other challenges around warehousing and what goes on in those fulfillment stores, and that seems to be a shared problem that. Not, it's not unique to those kinds of operators of like e-commerce platforms, but also to those high street retailers who do still run those back end fulfillment centers, warehouses, all those logistics. So what were some of the items that I think maybe came to light in that area around warehousing? Well,
that particular scenario, there was two representatives at the Retail Hive from that organisation, and the more technical representative there actually told me about how in the warehouses they actually need to modernise some of their infrastructure, because it's actually quite static from sort of the legacy days, whereby they got fixed stations that people within the warehouse have to work from. So for instance, they don't actually have Wi-Fi in their warehouses, which I found quite unusual, to be honest with you. If we give some of the use case of customers we've worked with, Gusto, you and I both know very well how their warehouse management systems operate, and how they've got really, really good high grade enterprise grade Wi-Fi across there to make all that happen. I found it strange to hear another organisation operate in a similar fashion, but not having basic. I go back to the basics, the fundamental stuff, Wi-Fi, and they said it's really impacting how mobile their users within a warehouse can work, because they're stuck to a station. They can't work there and then decide I need to work another part of the warehouse because they're stuck there. So I think there's definitely a lot more technology advancement that has to happen, and obviously the use of AI is going to sort of revolutionise automation, isn't it? And dare I start talking about robots, because it's certainly not my forte, but robotics within these facilities now is going to take over the human element, or it's going to complement the human element. And then I bring up AI already, but I guess we started talking about AI within loyalty within retailers as well, didn't we? Which is another hot topic, and how is AI used to leverage customer loyalty? I don't know if you had many conversations around that particular subject yourself, or.
Yeah, I think people were trying to tie up ways of the information that people are gathering, at what stages they're gathering that information, how they tie the buyer life cycle. There was one particular retailer that has like a real base level introduction to that loyalty scheme, and they were looking to show your order history, something as simple as your order history, but it, obviously we don't play in those spaces of providing that layer of tech, but clearly there's complexities in trying to get that to happen, otherwise they'd already be doing it. So I think that there's lots of information probably in lots of different pools, because people are using so many different systems these days, and they're all going to be siloed to a degree, and I feel like AI is really going to help break down the barriers between those different siloed environments and join things up, right? Allow people to make more intelligent decisions. And actually, just going back to one of the other items we discussed, there was a guy from a sofa provider, retailer, and they talked about using AI and using some of the intelligent capabilities that cameras have to offer these days, where they'll look at people, understand where they are, how much time they're spending in different areas of the store. And they said that they really bought into the idea that this would be really helpful for their operation, but they were struggling to find the use for the data. And they they said they were founder led, and the way that they set up their showroom was dictated by them, and there wasn't really any way to change that. No matter what the data might show you or the pathways that the data is showing you, the showroom was going to be set out that way because it was a founder led organization, and they were very close to the sort of design decisions around that. So they were struggling for, what to do with the data. Could they go as far as getting people's sentiment, but what was that going to change? They were struggling for what decisions they could really make off the back of that. So I think that's really going to be an interesting one for retailers looking forward.
Yeah.
What are they going to do with all this data? What's AI really going to do? How's it going to cut down time to market?
That particular use case or that scenario you mentioned was one of those typical people jumping into something before they've realised what the outcome they're looking to get. They obviously didn't. I think with AI, I'm not going to be the first person to have said this, but you need to know why you're using it. I think it's just been the amount of people in all sorts of organisations you hear, we're going to enable Copilot because that's what you should do. We're a Microsoft house. That's the next big thing in Microsoft, AI, Copilot, let's enable it. And actually, without realising what it's going to do. And some of the negative things it can do, i.e. some of the information, if you don't put the right governance around it and controls, what it could actually, or what sort of information could get passed out to other people that you don't necessarily want seeing that data. So I think that scenario is an organisation leaping into something without really realising what they want from it.
There was another guy that I got to speaking with who is in charge of IT for a cosmetics brand, and he was talking how Copilot's now quite native to a lot of people's environments, and people quite easily outsource email writing to Copilot, and it sounds quite harmless at a high level, but he was saying that he looks at some of these messages and it's just fluff, it's just noise, it's just no real progress because it's just AI speaking to AI, and it makes the written email sound really good, but no one was making any decisions off the back of that. AI wasn't going to make a decision with another AI bot, and he just really wanted to cut down the use of AI for that kind of stuff because these big organizations where there's lots of people, lots of layers, people are busying themselves sending each other emails back and forth, but to no real.
Yeah, it's certainly like a lot of technology investment. You have to have a desired outcome. How do you actually report an ROI back if you haven't got the goal in the first place? But I think AI is definitely one of the biggest ones where I think a lot of people, because it's such a big topic, you just think you should be using AI. You think if you're not already using it, you're being left behind. So then people make sort of knee-jerk impulse reactions with it and start adopting it without actually setting a goal. What's the outcome of this use case? And the result is a lot of money and time spent on something that end up becoming a waste.
Yeah, there's a lot of that. So I think that's a real good summary of the topics that I feel we covered. We had a whole day of talking to tech leaders through the whole day. There was some whiskey tasting at the end of it.
Yeah,
not a bit of me.
Neither me.
What would you say about other events that are on your agenda and other things going on in your calendar through 2026? Have you got any things to look forward to?
Yeah, a couple actually. I mean, one is again within the industry. So I'm going to go to the Retail Hive show, which I went to last year. I think it is a bit more big expo, a lot of suppliers there, and I just think it's still good to keep an open mind to what other technologies that are out there, even if they fall outside of sort of the core service portfolio that Exponential-e offer. I think it's good to be knowledgeable and aware of what other technologies that are being of interest to retail organisations. Sometimes we choose to partner with some of these organisations and embed our services together because you provide a complete offering then in some scenarios.
And there's a disco theme.
And there's a disco theme.
Yeah, to Retail Technology show this year. It was the Carnival last year, disco this year.
Even more reason to go.
Who knows what next year?
But then also, it's great because you bump into a lot of people there's always going to be a retail customers there or people you're talking to about projects, and you're going to bump into them people. It's always good to get FaceTime people and sit down and have a coffee. So Retail Technology show, I think, is one of those shows you need to be there really, show face, but there is some interesting content that comes out. Also, I do find a lot of the talks really, really useful. Tom James, the managing director of Bill's Restaurants has been to these tech shows before, and he always does a really good presentation, because even though he's a managing director, he's a very technology focused managing director. Talks a lot about AI and how Bills have utilised it, and if you look at their financial results, you can see that he's used it to good avail. So it does. Again, this goes back to that point about identifying a use case and then implementing a technology, and it can work. And he's a master of doing that. So I like seeing people like him who are going to have their own sessions, and it's good to hear from people at the senior leadership level. It's not always a technology person.
Yeah, they know what's going on, and they know how to actually get use out of it. It's good
Yeah,
to hear
and they're
from them as
setting
well.
and ultimately, in most occasions, they're setting the outcome, aren't they? You take me back to a point that somebody said to me at one of our roundtables, was trying to sort of turn the reposition IT as a
value center.
Yeah. Because it's still often seen as a cost center. It's expected to work. It's got a cost associated with it. But it's as simple as, like, people don't realise at the top, you unplug something, everything falls down. It's expected to work, but you unplug it and it stops working. So, I mean, that to me, that's value in itself. But yes, it's repositioning IT as a value center as opposed to a cost center. So I think it's good if you've got a senior leadership person who's talking about those sorts of items at these particular technology shows.
Yeah,
it just shows you someone's thought about value, how we can extract it out of technology.
Yeah, I'm looking forward to it. So that's coming up in April, and then through summer, I'm sure there'll be some other things that we'll find you at.
We've got Exponential-e hosting one next month. Actually, so it's like more of a small, intimate AI thought leadership forum. We got some really, really good keynote speakers, actually. So Jeremy Fleming, former director of GCHQ, he's going to be talking a lot of it around from a sort of cyber resilience side of things, governance type side of AI. And then we've got Daniel Hume, who is the CEO of Satalia, is Chief AI Officer at WPP, recently acknowledged as the 25th ranked person out of AI leaders in the world. So really, really good name there. And he's coming to have a keynote session as well. And he's going to be talking about what he's done around retail and consumer-led organisations, how he's transformed and embedded AI into the whole organisation rather than just standalone areas. So I think it's going to be a really interesting topic. And, you know, the retail customers and clients we're talking to that are going, I think, are going to get a lot of benefit out of that session. So it should be a good session as well. I'm looking forward to.
Sounds good. All right. Well, if you see Dave there,
yeah,
say hi.
At either event, come say hello. Have a coffee.
Nice one. All right. No, look, cheers for joining us, Dave. Some really useful insights, and hopefully these are some of the stories that some of the people that are watching this are really going to take away. And obviously, if they didn't make it to these events, what we want to do with this forum really is, you know, bring out some of those stories for the rest of the wider audience. Cheers, Dave.
Thanks for having me.